All right. Thanks, Sarthak, for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start off with the most sort of bullish introduction about yourself? Like, I want you to brag a little bit because I think people would have seen you on social media probably, but people don't know the full depth of everything that you do. So, just very quickly for the audience, could you just tell us about everything you do that they don't see on social media?
Sure. So I think what is seen is only the business media vertical, but essentially we're a business consulting and investment banking firm. We help startups raise capital from Series A to C. We do business advisory, which is mostly helping second or third generation in listed companies figure out building their own legacy because they feel, okay, the family business is running and it's making money by itself, but what is it that I have built by myself that I'm going to pass on to future generations? And we help them identify gaps in the market of businesses that they could build, given their existing expertise as well as infrastructure, and then help them do that. So that's business consulting and iBanking. Then there is also business education, where a lot of our learnings we do on a one-to-many basis online and offline because business consulting is not very scalable. It needs a lot more people to provide professionalized service. But with business education, we're able to kind of share those learnings with a larger cohort. And of course, business media is just top of the funnel to get people into this, as well as serve the larger audience in terms of just spreading education. And if it helps young people, why not?
Awesome. Yes, I really wanted to set this frame so people know that the main thing that you do behind the screen is work with a bunch of MSMEs, industries, businesses. Which brings me to the next question, right? Which is that the world is changing overall, right? There's like moving from a singular world to a multipolar world, and there's wars and there's lack of optimism. A very common refrain in our industry for a lot of young people is, we're not getting regulations, let's take a flight out, let's go somewhere else and build. And all of that is on one side. But when we've spoken privately, you've been very optimistic about the India opportunity. And so I just wanted you to share a bit about what you see as max potential, as generally, opportunity for the country in this changing global order.
I think whenever we speak about opportunity for India, because I'm not a techie, I'm not a developer, I don't understand tech too much, but it works positively for me in the short term because if you look at India's GDP, practically 60% of it is consumption driven. And when it's consumption driven, practically 75% of that consumption is basic needs, getting your household groceries and food items and absolute essentials. It's that additional 25% of consumption, which is discretionary, is what is rapidly growing. I think over the past 7 years, we've seen the ultra rich in India grow by 5 folds. It's a 500% increase. However, people who are considered to be poor by certain metrics have only reduced by about 50% over this 7-year period, which is why really the boom is in quite like how our per capita GDP is at about $3,000 per capita. I think starting at this inflection point, you see a lot of discretionary consumption begin to happen, which is why we're seeing growth and businesses are looking at opportunities and spotting arbitrages. What is it that the American consumer is consuming right now? And maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, it could be an opportunity for people in India to adopt it as part of their lifestyle. Which is why one part of our job is also constantly tracking where is that arbitrage opportunity in consumer behavior and journey. And I think one area where India doesn't get exposed to these consumer products quite like other countries do is the fact that we don't have access to TikTok. And in the US, TikTok is still considered to be the primary mode of social media consumption, which is why what blows up on US social media seldom translates or transfers in the form of knowledge to Indian social media soon enough, until you see people who are traveling to outside of India and then taking that information and making it viral on Instagram as well. So I think that 2-3 year cycle is something that a lot of businesses are trying to build their learnings from, innovate on products and sell. And another thing is, of course, from an innovation perspective, this business model has existed for so long, but people go to China, to cities like Yiwu, they will go to a Guangzhou for the Canton Fair that happens twice every year, just to look at the kind of innovation that exists and bring it to India. For example, we're staying at this hotel, and no matter which hotel property you stay in India at, there will be a small card that says between 9 a.m. to 12 noon, there is going to be window cleaning services. So please keep your curtains closed. And I feel it's so surprising, even in 2025. Why is it that we need people hanging from the buildings doing this? When in China, you easily have robots, which you'll get for as little as 50,000 rupees, that you can just deploy to do glass cleaning, right? So I think there are a lot of these products which can very easily come into India.
That's very interesting, because there is one is that there's this curve, right? As every nation moves up the GDP curve, a new level of consumption gets
Correct.
unlocked. Do you think it's going to be about looking at things in China, US, bringing them back in? Is there also like opportunity for homegrown India native stuff? Or because again, there's no shame in copying. Like Instagram has perfected this. They sort of copy Snapchat, outscale them. China's perfected this. So it's not a moral question, but sort of just practically, as people think about building products as well, do you think it's about seeing what works and then sort of tailoring it here? Or are you also seeing cases of homegrown India specific things?
100%, both actually. And I think when we speak about it, it makes me realize how, people think that what are the Indian exports, cultural exports to the US and Western markets. The conversation almost always starts with something like a yoga. And then now you would see gummies of ashwagandha, which have really taken off, or maybe, power capsules and stuff like that people speak of. Shilajit gummies is becoming a big thing. But I think what people don't realize is, if you look at, and this was a piece of news, I think just last week, which is the factories that produce isabgol or psyllium husk in India right now are also seeing a curb in supply and are unable to produce a lot, because just the demand from the US from a gut health perspective for natural fibers and products like isabgol, and on Western social media, it seems like after the GLP-1 drugs came about, a lot of people don't want medicine which they feel could lead to blindness, as there have been reports that Wegovy and Ozempic probably can lead to blindness in a few people. They're using isabgol as a natural GLP of some sorts because it fills you up, so you end up eating lesser. Plus, we're seeing that while yoga is more around cardio and mobility, the Indian mace is something that is becoming really popular in strength training in the US, because it fits in very well with calisthenics. And they say you can just pick up this Indian mace and do all your strength training with it. So I think culturally, India is at a great position. I was looking at the rankings of the most watched TV show in South Africa. And I was surprised to see that it's actually this one Indian show, starts with the name A. Can anyone guess? Anupama, correct. Can you imagine people in South Africa are watching Anupama, which is translated to their local language, and it's an absolute hit. So it says quite like how over the past 5 years, K-pop or over the past decade, K-pop has had its time. I think India pop or I-pop is probably what we're going to see a lot of in the coming decade.
Awesome. So you're saying you can sort of do like these cultural and indigenous exports that are finding demand. Okay. Now, over the past few months, we've been talking about this industry, this space together. And so to sort of tie it back in, I think one of the biggest challenges for any upcoming Indian company, startup, you do fundraising work with them, is access to capital, right? And we talk about internet capital markets, democratizing capital. And in theory, there's this argument that, DeFi capital is just sitting as a source of capital to be, plugged in. But obviously, there's a lot of bridges, there's a lot of challenges to get there, right? So generally, what's your take on how do you think, just from what you've seen of this industry so far, how do you think we could unlock access to capital? What are some of the problems that come to your mind when I say, okay, let's do DeFi capital tomorrow for your next company? What are the biggest challenges that come to mind when you sort of think about that?
Sure. I think whenever in the context of India we speak about access to capital, people tend to just use examples of microfinance and artisans and farmers not really having access to capital, or gig workers not really having access to capital. But I think even when we look at tier 1, which is an easier market to solve for any new tech product, I'd speak about an example which hits home. which is in our media vertical. Today, social media personalities have kind of become so big that no matter what opinion they give out, a lot of the larger companies find it very easy to drag them to court and send legal notices. And when I thought that, okay, thankfully we've not gotten any such legal notice yet for anything that we've said. But tomorrow, if we wish to break a story which actually impacts consumers, we face the threat of getting these legal notices. And I asked my insurance agent, I said, is there an insurance policy that can safeguard me? And I could think off the top of my head, there is a DNO insurance, which is directors and officers insurance, which companies take to protect their directors from legal liability. I said, maybe we could use a bit of that. Maybe we could use a bit of general and commercial liability that businesses who serve consumers use. Maybe we could use a little bit of professional indemnity insurance. And my insurance agent felt a little overwhelmed because he would have to combine all these policies and see how that claim would really come about. And I was possibly a slightly educated client for him who could tell him that let's build a combination. And I know this conversation has been ongoing for the past 2 months, and we've still not reached a point of conclusion where he can really check with an insurance provider and solve this for me. And I would say I'm just one guy who's not even giving stock tips online. Now, can you imagine India is possibly the largest creator economy right now from a supply side because access to data is so cheap, entry barriers are so low, and creators are coming up every day. What if these guys need insurance? Or forget about it. Even at our scale, where you have about 3 million followers and the media vertical makes good enough money, today, if I want to build a large enough studio and set up infrastructure, if I go to a bank, they would possibly lend me based on my existing collateral, which could be land or my existing business's cash flow, and not independently on the business media cash flow, which is such a tier one India problem that no one is solving for. So I would love to know if someone is solving for things like these, and say, for example, if I could just go to a blockchain startup which can access insurance for content creators like us and say, while my traditional insurer figures it out, can you safeguard us from any kind of legal liability that comes in the media business? If something like that exists and can legally be enforced or used, I mean, why not? I would totally take it up.
Awesome. So to wrap us out, I think, because again, the audience is primarily builders, developers. You want to give them something actionable to leave with. You mentioned at the start, you aren't a techie. In the same way you look at tech, folks here look at finance, right? But this industry has arrived at the intersection of both. And so while it's imperative for finance folks to learn tech, it's also imperative for engineers and builders to learn things on the finance side of things. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but to take the same example you shared, if as you left, if someone here came and said, hey, I have an insurance company that does this, what would be the top questions in your mind, when you're trying to decide if you can trust and use this product or not?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest question is going to be, how am I going to even get that money? Currently, when you get insurance claims in India, they're also tax-free. So I would think, okay, is it going to come in the form of an income to me? Will I have to pay GST on it? Will I have to pay income taxes on it? And if that is a fact, maybe the insurance policy amount that I would, insurance value that I would need would possibly be double of what I would need locally, because the local insurance, in the local insurance, I wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. So that's one. How easily will I be able to get the money? The second thing is, in a lot of insurance in India, you could have a cash-free option where you don't need to make a cash payment and the insurance provider makes it on your behalf. Is that something that the insurance be able to do for me is the second question. So I think I would love to know if this is something that they can solve for, given if they do it from outside of India. They'll have to solve for capital coming in. It's slightly complex. Can it be crowdsourced in India in some way? I don't think SEBI would allow it, which is also the reason why even a lot of creators wanting to give away some bit of stake in their personalities to actually crowdsource capital and then share royalties and revenues with anyone who's put in money in towards the cause is a big problem that can be solved. Because today, I have investors who come to me and say, what you're building is great and we'd like to back you and can we invest some money? And we're like, no, we want complete independence because I don't want to tie up with an institution, but maybe if it's individuals, I could repay them in the form of royalties and, they could also give us a lot more flexibility in the form of how we wish to scale and what we wish to speak about and what we don't.
Awesome. I think the frame, as we end, the frame to leave everyone with is that regulations don't just come, like they don't just appear. You have to start with product, and so you have one sort of problem statement from Sarthak. If you can build an insurance product that they can use, you have your first customer right here. You can DM him on Instagram, and if it's like a good enough pitch, you may have your first customer and build a product out. Thanks so much for coming in, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.